It's a little after 3:30, Friday, December the 18th, 2020, on this last Friday before Christmas. I want to welcome everybody and thank you for joining us. My name is Matt Repsdorf. I'm the current president for the year 2020 for the Lee County Bar Association. This is our community conversation as hosted by our Lee County Bar Diversity and Inclusion Committee. And again, I want to thank everybody for joining us. So everyone knows, we are recording today's meeting live on Zoom. It will be recorded and streamed on our Lee County Bar Association YouTube channel for those who'd like to stream on YouTube or go back and watch at a later date. The Lee County Bar Association obviously is pretty self-explanatory. We are the local bar association for Lee County, our Lee County attorneys, judges, legal staff, and our community members. One of the things we wanted to do this year as a bar association was not only to provide traditional value to our members that are part of the legal community, but we wanted to be part of a larger conversation amongst the community and use the Lee County Bar Association as a platform to foster communication and foster conversations amongst the community. This year has been exceptional in a lot of ways, some good and some not so good. One of those goals we had for ourselves at the beginning of the year was to really break out of the realm of what I'll call as partisanship, divide, discrimination, or disinclusion. We wanted to provide a platform where it was a neutral site, a neutral platform for persons of all races, creeds, genders, backgrounds, ethnicities to come together and have real conversations. Not just legal. Legal is always a part of it, of course, with the Bar Association, but conversations that affect everybody at some point in our lives, and every member, not just of our association, but every member of our community at large. This is kind of part two of an event we hosted that our Diversity Inclusion Committee hosted earlier in the year. I believe it was towards the end of August or September. And if you can all recall back what seems like so far ago, the country was very heated. The temperature of this country, the conversations surrounding race, surrounding politics were very difficult. And our Diversity and Inclusion Committee contacted me as president of the bar and said, now is our opportunity. Now is an opportunity to meet a goal that we had to start bringing together these conversations amongst community members. And I couldn't be more proud of the way that came together. And we had such overwhelming success and overwhelming positive feedback with that event that we said, before this year is over, we have to have a follow-up conversation. Now that elections are over, now that a lot of this is hopefully behind us, let's figure out how we're going to repair ourselves, how we're going to have this conversation to come back, to all get back on the same page, get back on the same team, and see how we're going to come together as a community to make sure that we can move forward together and make progress for our community in the right way. And if we disagree on those things, we can do so respectfully. And at least we can have that conversation amongst each other so we can all understand and have empathy as to our different viewpoints and where we're coming from. That's the point of today's conversation. And our Diversity Inclusion Committee has hit the nail right on the head again in putting together this event with three great panelists that we're going to have today. Our new esteemed mayor of City of Fort Myers, Kevin Anderson, Mr. Mark Collins, who's also joining us, and Calvin Martin. And I'm going to let our moderators introduce our panelists here in a little more detail. But again, I want to thank you very much for joining us. It has been one of the honors of my year and of my career to serve as president of the Lee County Bar Association. In particular, the Diversity and Inclusion Committee has helped to make this year so special, in a year with a bunch of challenges. But of course, as we all know, challenges bring opportunities. And when you ask for opportunities, you take them head on. So our Diversity Inclusion Committee is co-chaired by Ms. Kelly Fayer and Eden Moyton, and they're going to lead us in introducing our moderators and our panelists and getting our conversation started. So at this time, I want to turn it over to Ida, who is the head of our Regional Conflict Council for the 20th Judicial Circuit, a great member of our Bar Association, a great attorney. And if you don't know Ida, I'd be shocked because she's all over the place in our community. So Ida, go ahead and get us started, and thank you all, and I hope you enjoy the conversation.
Thank you so much, Matthew, and thank you for that warm introduction. Good afternoon. My name is Etani Moten, and I am the Regional Counsel for the 2nd District Court of Appeal. Thank you for joining us today for the Inclusion Revolution Seminar. The Lee County Bar Diversity and Inclusion Committee was founded by Ms. Kaylee Fair, past president of the Lee County Bar Association. The Diversity and Inclusion Committee is important because it joins us with other community members and helps us to see different viewpoints. It unites people who hold different values and ethnic backgrounds to work together in harmony. This makes us stronger, not just as a committee, but as a community. And together we can face the problems at hand and foster an inclusive culture to enhance the quality of life for everyone. I would like to introduce the members of our committee. You've already heard from Matthew Ropsdorf. He is the president of the Lee County Bar, and he is a fabulous president. I would now like to introduce Ms. Lauren Lbaugh. She is the Lee County Bar Executive Director, and she works very hard to make seminars like this one be possible. Mr. Jeff Hercombe is a member. He is a partner with Roberts, Reynolds, Bedard, and Tuzio, and has been practicing in the area of civil defense for over 12 years. He grew up in Fort Myers and is glad that he can give back to his community by being part of this committee in the local bar association. Mr. Joshua Johansson served for more than 21 years in the United States Navy Submarine Force as both department chief and division commander. He graduated from Valdosta State University and Ave Maria School of Law. He is a member of the Florida and Lee County Bar Association. He lives with his wife and 3 children in Lehigh Acres. Ms. Rose Lee is the managing dependency attorney of the 20th Judicial Circuit for the Office of Criminal Conflict and Civil Regional Counsel. For the past 4 years, she has advocated for indigent parents in juvenile dependency and termination of parental rights. She grew up in Southwest Florida and is passionate about serving her home community. Mr. Henry Lee Paul, among his many achievements, served on the Supreme Court Commission on Professionalism from July 2012 through 2016. He served as an ex officio member until the commission was disbanded in 2019. Mr. Paul was appointed by the Florida Supreme Court Justice Fred Lewis to serve on the Confidentiality Subcommittee. Mr. Paul served on the Board of Governors Standing Committee on Professionalism 2012 through 2018. He currently serves on the Student Education and Admission to the Bar Committee. The Honorable Gil Perez is a circuit court judge in Lee County. He is assigned to the Unified Family Court in Fort Myers. Ms. Christy Scott is the founder of Light Path Law, PA, a Christian-focused law firm. She practices in business and church law, employment law, and civil litigation. She is AV rated by Martindale-Hubbell and has been recognized as a rising star by Super Lawyers magazine. The Honorable Kathleen Smith has a passion for serving others. She began her legal career as an assistant public defender in 1990, right out of law school. And she continued in this role until she was elected the public defender for the 20th Judicial Circuit in 2008. She has served on the Lee County Bar Association Executive Council since 2016 and was just re-elected for another term. She has also been selected to participate on several Supreme Court task force and steering committees to address mental health, substance abuse, and developing treatment court best practices and certification criteria. Ms. Smith grew up in Fort Myers and is honored to continue serving as public defender and to be actively involved in many initiatives to make our community a happier, healthier, and safer place to live. Ms. Diana Golden and Ms. Diana Gorovich have also helped a great deal on this committee. They have helped to ensure that everything goes smoothly. And now I will turn it over to our fabulous founder of the committee, Ms. Kelly Fair.
Ita, thank you so much for that introduction. And I want to thank you for being the first chair of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee when it was established. It has been a true honor to receive so much support from the Lee County Bar Association and the community for the work that we do. We truly appreciate all of our panelists, not for just the time that you're giving us today, but for what you do each and every day to make our community a better place. Our first panelist is the newly elected mayor of Fort Myers, Kevin Anderson. Mayor Anderson has a long history of service, from being a veteran and a school resource officer to being elected to the Fort Myers City Council and serving as a chair of a state of Florida committee on juvenile justice. It is remarkable that his goal as mayor is to be remembered as the person who served and represented each and every citizen of Fort Myers. Our next panelist is Mark Collins. He is not only the creator of Lunch with Friends, he has a reputation for helping anyone who asks him and for making a difference in more lives than we can count. Some of the organizations that he has made a significant impact on as a community philanthropist include Salus Care, Big Brothers Big Sisters, American Cancer Society, Gulf Coast Humane Society, Pace Center for Girls, Valerie's House, and today the Lee County Bar Association. Next is Calvin Martin. He is the Director of Program Advocacy and Inclusion for the Florida Guardian Ad Litem program. He travels throughout the state to make sure that our most abused, neglected, and abandoned children have people to represent them who are capable of making these children feel safe and respected. In June of this year, he won the Reunification Hero Award from the American Bar Association. He was one of only 11 people in the country to receive this recognition. Last but not least is our moderator. She is the publisher of the Lee County Bar Association's monthly magazine, and she has won more awards for her professional and community work than I have time to tell you about. Ladies and gentlemen, Connie Ramos Williams.
Thank you, Kelly. And thank you to the Lee County Bar Association, Matt Restorff, Kelly, and Ida for inviting me to take part in today's very important conversation. Today's panel discussion, we're gonna hear from our experts and our panelists, but we're gonna hear from a broad range of topics on inclusion that will include topics: veterans, disabled, Hispanics, LGBTQ+ communities. Those are topics that were submitted by business and community leaders, as well as some questions as well. But we do invite each one of you that are participating today in this webinar to submit down below. There's a chat box there. If you have questions on any of these topics we're going to go over, or questions specific to any of our panelists, you're free to go ahead and enter your question in the chat box, and we'll go ahead and try to answer those as we go along or at the end of our webinar session. If everybody's ready, let's go ahead and get started. The first topic for today is on racial diversity in government. The questions that were submitted and this topic were by Stephanie Bendick, a member of the Florida Bar Association's statewide committee on diversity and inclusion, and the Lee County Association for Women Lawyers. Her first question is for Kevin. How do you feel racial diversity in government helps the government and the community? And what steps will you take to encourage and sustain racial diversity at the government level?
Well, thank you very much for the question. I'm assuming you can hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. You know, when I did the recruiting and hiring for the police department, I always maintained that the agency should be as reflective of the community as possible. We reflect those we are serving, and I continue that belief today in government. And I'm proud to say, if you take a look at the city of Fort Myers, we have a fairly diverse workforce, especially in positions of leadership. Our police chief, our fire chief, our director of public works are all African-American males. Our interim director of HR is an African-American woman. Our engineer is a female. Our interim director of finance is also a female. So we have a lot. The head of the CRA, the economic or the enterprise center. So we have a lot of diversity amongst our staff. And I think that's very important because we are a diverse community. And if we're going to be able to recognize and address the needs of the community, we have to have that understanding. And by having the diversity, that helps us meet that understanding.
Very good. And I know you're newly elected to your role, Kevin. Do you have plans to further that question? Does the city have plans to put an actual policy or strategy in place, or is there already one to ensure that we continue with that diversity?
We have policies in place to help continue with that. But this past year, we approved the position for manager. I don't recall the exact title, but it's to deal with diversity and inclusion within the city as a whole.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. And don't worry, you don't get any points deducted from you, Kevin, if you don't know everything just yet.
I'm in the honeymoon period.
Yes, you have a grace period right now. So
Thank you.
We're glad you joined us today. The next question submitted by Stephanie Bendick is to Mark. How important do you think racial equality is to those living and working in our community? And what do you think we can do to address this problem?
I think it's important. I don't think it's important enough on many levels. I've talked to Mayor Anderson. We talked the other night, and I think right now, and this is not political, I think the city council itself is in the best shape it's been in a while. I think we have great opportunities. I think we've got strong leadership. I think we're getting there. I don't think we're there. I think we would all agree to that. There's so many more avenues of diversity that we haven't tapped in on yet. Talking to the mayor, I know that is one of his things that he's heavily driven to do is bridge those gaps. I think the community wants it. I have been a part in, when Kelly asked me if I would do this, I said, I'll do it if, because there seems, I've been on so many of these things where we talk about it, but then nothing happens after the discussion. I think we're poised right now to really make some significant changes. And people say, why do you do what you do? I said, for the people of Lee County. They said, who are they? I said, if you live here, I'm for you. I'll be the voice. If you can't speak for yourself, I'll be the eyes if you can't see it for yourself. If you're afraid to put your foot out there, I'll push you right now in the middle of the road because we have to get there. I think we've made some great strides. I think the Council for Diversity and Equality is a great start, but I think that's just the beginning. But I think we're on a great track. And like I said, right now with the leadership we've got in place, I think we have as good an opportunity as we've ever had. I'd like to see, of course, on a county level, you know, that's different than the city. I think the city's doing a great job of it right now. There's fair representation in many ways. I'd like to one day see on the commission We need a lady. You know, there's many areas we're missing, but those are things that the people have to speak on. I think we have to educate people. I think this year has been totally, as far as voting goes, it's been great. It's been a great opportunity to see how things really work. I think once somebody's elected, you get behind them, you do whatever you can, even if we don't all agree, you still work for the greater cause of the community.
Very good. And I think to your point, Mark, and this is something that I see you doing quite a bit with your lunch with friends, and you're out in the community, you're surrounded by community leaders and business leaders all the time, just continuing the conversation on a daily basis. Because so many times, you know, we see government, but we also need to do that individually as well, as you were saying. And I think the more we can all keep it top of mind, and certainly after this past year that we've had, I think it's definitely top of mind with everybody. And there's been a lot of progress made, but it can't stop there. It needs to continue. And I think, to the Lee County Bar's credit, this conversation is part of that progress that's being made by gathering everybody here today to have this open discussion and dialogue. So thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
The next question from Stephanie Bendick is to Calvin. Why is racial diversity important to the children served by the Florida Guardian Ad Litem program, and who face abuse, neglect, and abandonment? And I'll repeat that, I apologize. Why is racial diversity important to the children served by the Florida Guardian Ad Litem program who face abuse, neglect, and abandonment?
All right, excellent.
Calvin?
Thank you, Connie. I definitely want to re-emphasize something the mayor said, and that is ensuring that our institutions, critical services, all our functioning organizations better match our community. And I think that's how we begin to enhance and move to ensuring that better equity and equality will begin to evolve within our community. So with that said, also when considering racial diversity, and particularly within the child welfare system, we primarily look at the disproportionality and disparity surrounding racial groups and low-income families within that system. You know, things such as the correlation between poverty and maltreatment, visibility or exposure to bias, limited access to services, geographic restrictions, or even child welfare professionals knowing or unknowingly letting personal biases impact their actions or decision-making. It is important for child welfare professionals to address their own biases when working with families. Many biases develop as from schemas or associations that let us quickly analyze people, places, situations. But these same associations can and do potentially at times evolve into learned stereotypes and operate as a lens through which we interpret and predict the world. The other thing is although we can quickly recognize something such as explicit bias, which include overt acts of discrimination, racism, prejudice, it's really implicit bias that is more difficult to assess because they include unconscious attitudes and beliefs that we are typically unaware of that we even have as biases. And so often that some of these biases lead us to believe that all families should be just like our own, or we may think that, well, if that was my child, I would not do that. So we must break down this method of evaluating families and focus on safety and what is truly in the best interest of the child. Mainly because of this mode of thinking, it is kind of most natural for our brains to process, but we must begin to kind of look at conscious decisions, especially as reflecting for every step that we do as we proceed within the child welfare system. So I think being aware of these biases enabled us to flag and remove them, especially when making fair decisions, individualized assessments. The other thing is practicing ongoing self-reflection of our beliefs, our presumptions, our opinions, can assist with checking our pre-existing and newly formed biases, which typically derive from our personal experiences. And then the last thing I'll say about it real quick, Connie, is exposure to varied groups may also reduce biases. Meeting and working with individuals from communities that can actually reduce our biases. More specifically, contact with positive examples can shape or even reduce how we associate those stereotypes to particular groups. And so it's no different than how we begin to embrace a more diverse staff, establishing peer mentor groups, reunification heroes, or even allowing parent allies to meet with legislatures. I think that's the best way to kind of help break down and move forward within the community.
Thank you, Calvin. Great advice, great tips there. And we thank you for all that you're doing in for guardian ad litem.
Thank you.
To protect those children out there.
Definitely.
The next topic is for inclusion is affordable housing. These questions that I'm about to ask the group were submitted on behalf of Malcolm Godwin, president of the Isaac Anderson Jr. Bar Association. And the first question is back to Kevin. At the government level, what can be done to provide affordable housing options for all members of the Fort Myers community? Did we lose Kevin? Kevin, you're on mute, by the way. Let me see if.
Yeah.
There you go. Sorry about that, Kevin.
Okay. Now, that's a very difficult and complex issue at times. Let's take a look at some real figures real quick. 50% of the people who live in Fort Myers own versus rent. It takes 27% of your monthly income to meet your housing expenses in Fort Myers, while it only takes 24% in Cape Coral and 17% in Lehigh. But more significant is the fact that Fort Myers has the greatest percentage of its population that earns over $200,000 a year, while we have the greatest percentage of the population that earns less than $35,000 a year. So when we look at affordable housing, there's a lot of costs involved, just, the land, the permits, the construction, everything that goes with it. A lot of things that we as government don't necessarily have control over. If you own a piece of land, I can't dictate that you sell it for less than what it's worth. But one thing I think we can do to help the affordable housing issue is to look at our economic development plans. And are we doing enough to attract the right economic development to the city so that we're raising the income levels? So therefore, people making more money can then afford more in the monthly housing costs. That's a big part of this. We have done a lot in the city with the housing authority to make, for example, I think we have about 2,200, I want to say, affordable housing units that we make available throughout the city, whether it be through Section 8 vouchers or public housing. We're working with several developers to bring low-income housing or attainable housing by, for example, with one of the projects, the city is donating the 7 acres, and we've committed $1 million to the site preparation. It's going to be 51% attainable, to which the city's committed to a 10% or $10,000 down payment assistance for those units. Small piece of it though. The need is in the thousands. And again, I think economic development in helping bring good paying jobs to this area is going to be a piece of addressing affordable housing.
Thank you, Kevin. I don't know if you had finished. I think your feed was a little paused there for a minute, so I didn't want to cut you off there. Part of the Horizon Foundation and Horizon Council Economic Development Office here, I know they're talking continuously about attainable housing and affordable housing. as we are bringing in, and I know you're addressing this continuously in conversations, but I think some of the feedback that has been heard out there and some of what's been submitted in this session, the topic, conversation was, they were talking about wards 1 through 4 having multiple housing developments built, but that the
Okay,
price points were too high for the minorities that live in the area where those were going to be built, I think off the MLK area. I don't know if you have anything you'd like to add about that at all. I think Kevin may have to refresh his audio feed, so sorry about that, guys. But he'll come back in here in a second here. But I think that's part of the conversation, is just making sure that with, even though we have affordable, attainable housing on, discussions and all this development, making sure that the right price point for those houses or apartments that are entered into the market are below the $200,000. Because I think some of the conversation this past year was some of the new attainable or affordable housing wasn't really affordable to the people that it was supposed to be affordable to. It may be less expensive for some, but certainly not necessarily affordable for those minorities that are below a certain income level. So that's one of those areas that I'm hoping, and I think everybody's hoping, including the Malcolm who submitted these, is affordable housing, but at price points that the true lower income minorities can afford. Kevin, are you with us? Okay, he's going to come in and out. So I may bring that back to Kevin. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and jump to Mark with the next question, if that's all right with everybody. How do you think our community can come together to fight homelessness?
Oh, wow. That's a huge one.
Yes, it is.
But I do have some ideas for it. I think that, and those of you who know me know that I truly in my heart feel this way. I think that the homeless man on basically every corner I drive by right now is just as valuable and important as every one of us on this Zoom. I think everyone has potential. For whatever reason, I always go back to when Sam Galloway says at the soup kitchen, I don't care why they don't have money to eat, they deserve to eat. Well, I think everybody deserves a fair chance. I have ideas. I've looked at other models. I've really studied this. I've seen it work really well in Cincinnati. I was reading about a place today. They have facilities. I know in the last council meeting, this came up in Councilman Street's. It's a big problem. He said, why don't we just get one of these rundown hotels and we make something? I think the problem is bigger than that. While I think we should do that and we should be able to help these people, in my world, it would be for 6 to 9 months. They have to work, they have to be in school, or they have to volunteer until they work. They would have financial literacy counseling, personal assistance, so that we're just kind of like Megan Rose with Better Together, her model. Not that we're just saying, come move in and live here. It's, we believe you're better than that. Mm-hmm. You have potential. We're going to help you find your potential. We're going to make that the best potential possible for you, because we want you, number one, to have purpose and feel great about yourself. Because I promise, now I don't know exactly, I guarantee you most of those people on every corner, they don't feel great about themselves. How could you? For some people, and I've talked to a few people, said, well, that's how they make a living. I'm sure that's true, but not the majority. I just can't believe that. So I think we as a community, I've never seen a community more giving than ours. I think absolutely. Fort Myers, Southwest Florida, it is a unique community, and we love our own. Organizations that go way out all over the country to look to find people to raise awareness or raise money. I always think that's really not going to work, because we like our own people and we want to help our own people. And we have the means, we have the knowledge. It's just got to be, rounded up and put in the right, get all the moving parts working. Now, how do we do that? I don't know, but I know it'll never change if we don't start.
Mark, thank you. You brought up so many important key points, Mark. One is hand up instead of the handout, helping those out, but making sure that, they are also accountable for part of that. They may get a affordable housing or free housing for the homeless, but then they're volunteering or they're doing some things that help them feel like they're not getting that handout, that they're really responsible for that and accountable for that as well. The other thing is you had talked about like taking a hotel that might be bankrupt at this point, or a hotel that, maybe sitting there, ready to purchase for sale. You shared on your Facebook page, I think just a couple weeks ago, Mark, a couple areas throughout our country that charities have pulled together to purchase a hotel with 80 beds, 80 rooms, and they've opened it up as a homeless shelter.
Right.
Now, obviously, it goes beyond just purchasing a hotel. There's going to have to be funds put together to manage and maintain and sustain that. That has to be looked at. So it's not as easy as it sounds. But I think perhaps that may be something Kevin or others within our government could take a look at and maybe unite or come together with maybe our United Way that has, I think close to 100, if not over 100 nonprofits, where everybody pulls together, works together to help in the funding of that. Because after all, we're all doing the same thing. We're all looking out for each other. So the fact that anybody has to be homeless is a sad thing for any community to have to face. So I think there's definitely means and creative ways, as you pointed out, Mark, for us all unite, have healthy conversations over to make sure everyone's included in this community, has the ability to have a home and confidence that brings, so that they can be part of our society and feel like they're an equal part of it. So
if I can add one more thing, Connie.
Yes, please.
Quickly. I know there's a demographic that if they went into a place like this, they're not capable of learning. Maybe they aren't capable of a job skill. But then I think to be able to identify that, then I still think at that point we have a responsibility just to our fellow brothers and sisters, that then we can get them aligned for the services that they need.
Mm-hmm.
Because just because they don't possess what it takes for whatever reason, they shouldn't be forgotten. I'm telling you, it breaks my heart seeing these people.
Mm-hmm.
Just breaks my heart. And it seems more and more.
Well, it sounds like there's going to be more conversations to come on this. Hopefully, that's why we're having this webinar conversation today. I know the Lee County Bar is thrilled about this conversation today, but it's also to hopefully, after we finish this conversation, we don't let it stop there. We come up with some action items from this. We come up with some ideas or solutions. We might be able to do something really promising for our Lee County area.
Can I jump in?
I'm sorry.
Can I jump in?
Please, and thank you for joining us again. I'm so sorry that you got cut off there.
No, I switched devices, so hopefully this one will work better. So I'm in the process of putting together 3 task force that will last a period of 6 months. And the goal for each one is not to talk about what the problems are. We know what the problems are, but to come up with solutions that they can present to the council. Solutions that are reasonable, they're actionable, and they're sustainable. It's very easy to come up with solutions that you just can't do. So one of them is going to be on building unity in the community. The other one is on homelessness, and the third one's on housing. So I'm really looking forward to get some participants from the community who all know about these issues and will hopefully come to the table, unfold their arms, open their minds, have good dialogue on what some good solutions are. And then that will build the foundation. Now, when it comes to the homelessness, what we need to understand is there's 4 categories of homelessness. There's the chronic homelessness. And a lot of these people they have serious mental health issues or physical health issues or chronically unemployed. You have the situational homeless who, due to some crisis or event in their life, they've become homeless. You know, maybe they've lost their job, been downsized, their spouse lost their job, something happened, maybe an illness. You have the episodic, which are typically younger people who have mental health, substance abuse issues, or employment issues. They, for the most part, they live at home, but they get in arguments, fights, they get kicked out, or they leave the house. So they're in and out on the street, back in the house. Then we have a group of hidden homeless, which we don't see. They've lost their house. Maybe they're living with a friend or a family, or they may have found an abandoned building they can hole up in, or even live in a car. The point is, each one of these categories requires a different strategy. A lot of homeless are not, they don't want to be sheltered. They want meals. They want a place to get clean, to wash their clothes, clean restroom facilities. They don't necessarily want to be sheltered, because sheltering them means rules and regulations that they don't necessarily want to abide by. And a lot of this has to do with maybe their status, their mental health, condition. So I agree with Mark in that we do need a facility where we can shelter people that can benefit from being sheltered. Those who, once you stabilize them with a shelter, whether it be in an old motel or a typical shelter, or it's a rapid housing, rehousing, or a housing first approach, whichever one, where you get them stabilized, then you can work on the issues that led them to being homeless. Providing counseling for mental health, providing medical help, making sure they're fed, job training. The other thing is, you can give people an income, but if they don't know how to manage that income, they could be right back where they are. So there's a lot of areas where we can mentor and coach and train to help people change their life situation. But we're always going to have a percentage where you're not going to really be able to affect that change. So we've got to come up with a strategy for them as well. And that could simply be something like a homeless campus, where they can be safe and have access to a clean restroom and showers and laundry facilities and the different services that they need. But it's going to take a lot more than just government. It's going to take the community as a whole. We need the philanthropists of the community. We need the churches. We need business. We need all kinds of people involved in trying to help with this problem.
Thank you, Kevin. And I'm glad to hear that there's some solution and a task force and things taking place. I'm excited to hear that. I think everybody's probably excited to hear that, but it's going to take a lot of work. And like you said, together, a lot of us, a lot of hands on deck. It takes a village, as they say. The next question is for Calvin. And I know you were waiting a while for this one, Calvin, right? This question is, what impact does poverty have on children?
Thanks, Connie. Actually, I loved listening to our mayor and Mark, which I definitely want to echo something that Mark said real quick, is because when he talked about the high level of giving and passion within the community, and myself living outside of your community, but being very fortunate to travel and communicate with folks across our wonderful state, and recently I have met with a team out of your area who exhibits and shows those very same traits that Mark alluded to. So as he was speaking, and I'm thinking back on my recent meeting with them, how I saw that same brevity, that same passion, the same thing that he just shared. So I definitely wanted to point it out. It's no doubt that it's a part of the core within the community that you all live in. First, it's important to note that not all parents who live in poverty abuse their children, and many who do are not poor. So poverty in itself is often mistaken for neglect, resulting in increased rates of child abuse reports. The inability to feed, clothe, or house a child should not be mistaken for neglect. Mistaking poverty for neglect contributes to high rates of child abuse cases for low-income families. Just simply addressing the underlying issues of poverty that, especially what the mayor touched on, through acknowledgement, through increased parent involvement, increased financial support, increased education, can help prevent child maltreatment, limit unnecessary child removals, and also increase reunification and even protect parental rights. Some of the ways that I believe that we can help improve poverty levels within any, not just your community, but any given community, is by making better linkages between child welfare and various economic support systems or services, expediting the enrollment process for economic benefits for child welfare involved families, creating an employment pipeline that coordinates job recruitment, placement and career advancement services for families in the child welfare system. Also, the concept of family team meetings, where you bring representatives designated by the family and other support systems together that are designed to help parents better access benefits, assess building programs and job training. And lastly, acknowledge and innovative solutions are needed to, I think, prevent poverty from being mistaken as child maltreatment, as well as to prevent poverty from contributing to actual child abuse.
All very good points. Thank you, Calvin. So much to this conversation. I know we could talk about each one of these topics and sections for forever, but we have limited time today and a couple more topics. The next topic is on developmentally disabled. And this question is really going to be for all the panelists. And this is what Kevin Lewis, Executive Director from Lark, has submitted. He says that Lark has been serving individuals impacted by intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families since 1954, when they opened the first school in Lee County for students with special needs, and have advocated over 6 decades for inclusion in both the community and workplace. Florida currently ranks 50th nationally in per capita funding for services for persons with intellectual and developmental disabilities, 50th nationally. What do you all think you or our community can do to support this underfunded, diverse population? Calvin, since we've been starting with Kevin, let's start with you on this one.
Thank you, Connie. I'm gonna speak to the child welfare system, and pretty much, as you know, child welfare professionals work with community and youth at the highest risk for abuse. And so within this highly vulnerable group of children, it is an uneven, it's children, there is pretty much a more vulnerable group within this group, and that is those with disabilities. These disabilities typically fall into the following categories, like learning disabilities, emotionally disturbed, developmental disabilities, speech, language disorders, etc. The statistics indicating disproportionality in both the child welfare system and the disability systems are eerily similar. Much of the child welfare literature has posed several reasons why these disparities exist. Some state that the reason is rooted in desperate needs of African American children. Others suggest that it is a lack of cultural competence workers, coupled with the existence of institutionalized poverty and place of residence. While all parents do face daily challenges in their roles and responsibilities as parents, people with disabilities can face additional challenges due to negative societal attitudes about their competency as parents, physical and programmatic barriers to services and supports, and pretty much unemployment and poverty, which is chronic among people with living with disabilities. So pretty much as a viable solution, case managers and child welfare professionals need to thoroughly assess factors occurring at multiple levels, multiple settings, such as in the home, in the schools, in neighborhoods. Case managers also should also need to assist families in having access to needed resources and services in the community, particularly culturally defined stigmas that associate disabilities must also be addressed when implementing policies to prevent or intervene in maltreatment situations. So one of the things I can suggest is local community service providers, anyone with a voice for children and families, need to advocate for the rights of children with disabilities to receive all of these needed and available fundings within your local area.
Very good. Do you find, and obviously, you know, you represent children that are abused, neglected, et cetera, but as you pointed out, with the developmental disability, that puts them more at risk because they're not able to defend themselves. Children can't defend themselves depending on that age very well, but you add on a disability on top of that, and it certainly makes them more vulnerable. Do you believe that there's enough in play in our community to help assist the guardian ad litem with these situations or these cases or these parents in this situation?
One of the things that, and I would be remiss to not to just focus simply on children with disabilities. We also got to look at the parents with disabilities too, that come into our system, because a lot of times they are unfortunately can be pulled into the system due to those limiting factors. And so going directly to your question, Connie, is that I do not believe there is enough services that that are available in any of our communities that could fairly assist and appropriately assist our this population. You know, so I think is there a means for us to do that? Absolutely, and especially it's the concerted might and will of your community to, I think, do that. So you probably have some great organizations, one or two great organizations that are doing the work. But I can tell you, if they step up, could talk to us today, right now, they would probably tell you, yes, there is more that we can and should and need to do.
Okay, thank you. Mark, I'm going to go to you on this question too. And I know Lark is an organization near and dear to you and Lori, who has recently passed, and we adore and love, and her memory lives on. And I know Lark is doing some scholarship in her name, I believe you are. What do you think you or our community can do to support this underfunded, diverse population?
Yeah, this is probably the most dear and near to my heart. For those that don't know, my wife passed away in August, and she was in a wheelchair since birth. And she was the very first student in the state of Ohio to graduate public school, because before they put them in special schools, and she didn't want to do that. And so her parents had to pay for ramps, everything out of pocket. And she did it, and she was remarkable. And, I do serve, volunteer for Lark on one of the committees. So when she passed away, you wouldn't believe the number of people that we have on a waiting list that can't get services because they don't have the funding. Those of you who are on here who know me, and I've had people say, how do you choose your charities you help? I love the redheaded stepchildren. I want the oldest, which Lark is 60. I want the ones that aren't popular, that people might have forgotten out of no one's fault. It just happens. And Lark was one of those. When Lori passed away, we came up with this idea within our family, a scholarship fund. And what we're going to do is raise $500,000 within 3 years. The interest on that would provide services for everybody in Lee County, which would be unbelievable. They've got one guy at Lark who was there the first day it opened, and he's still there. They've got some great programs, because what they're trying to do is teach the Living Center, simple things, how to make a basic meal, because a lot of these people, especially kids, young adults, their caregivers, their parents are going to die. So they've got to learn some skills. Then it also helps identify those that can't come up with the skills, what their needs are going to be. And, I see Sunny Lubner on here. We've done a couple of events to raise money. And Sunny told me when I asked her, would you help me? And she said, I forgot about Lark. And she said, I've been here, we've helped with Lark. So this past year, when we did the event at Fran Fenning's house, she was leaving. She said, these are truly God's forgotten children. So I think it's one of those things that it's just kind of out of sight, out of mind. But our community's really stepped up. We're going to have the inaugural event in March, and a lot of support. So I'm very committed to it because that's been my life for the past 20 years. So I think there's a great hope.
Mark, thank you. And that you answered the question perfectly. What can you do? What can our community do? Look for things like Lark and scholarship opportunities, scholarships and the fund that you have there and others in our community, because that can make a difference. I didn't realize that if that scholarship fund was met with that $500,000, just the interest alone could keep that organization going. So, and it's been here since 1954 with its first member still there. That's incredible.
Right.
It says a lot about the organization.
It couldn't keep the program going, but it would keep the people on the waiting lists that they've had, some of them for years.
Oh, okay.
Immediate services.
Thank you for clarifying that, because I don't want to misspeak here.
Right.
Well, thank you for what you're doing, and encouraging us to do the same. Kevin, same question for you. What do you think you or the community can do to help this diverse population?
Well, first of all, I want to commend Lark on what they've done for all these years. For those of you who may not know, what Lark stands for is the Lee Association for Remarkable Citizens, and Mark used that word, remarkable. And I think that's important for people to understand, that it's so easy to judge others or to feel sorry. And we need to break that and get in that. How do we assist others? And Lark has done a great job with assisting this piece of the population, this segment of the population. However, it's what Lark does is just really addressing the tip of the iceberg, I guess. There's such a greater need. And I commend Mark for his efforts. And I think that's what we need, is more people, one, to understand this segment of the population and how, what we can actually do, how we can help them gain independence. Get them in positions, not everybody, but do our best to make as many as we can employable and find them employment to where they can live independently. I mean, you know, I'm not saying that they'll live totally independently, but we can move them toward that sense of independence as much as we can. And it's going to take, again, it's like every other problem. It takes an awareness and it takes a commitment from the community, not just government, not just the nonprofits, but the community as a whole, to recognize the problem and make the commitment to do what we can for the problem.
Thank you, Kevin. Great conversation. I'm going to go right into our next topic, which is protection of Hispanics. And this section, the questions and the topic were submitted on behalf of Carla Campos Anderson. Many of you guys know her, president of the Miguel C. Fernandez III Hispanic Bar Association. Here's what she has had to say here. The Hispanic community is having a crisis in regards to being a victim of crime. Due to immigration issues, people are hesitant to come forward if they are a victim or witness to a crime. As a result, there are segments of the population that are continually being harmed. Without discussing anything related to your views on immigration, she asked all of you, how do you think we can make sure the Hispanic population feels included in our community and has equal access to justice? Kevin, we'll go ahead and start with you.
First, I'd like to say I was proud to call Miguel Fernandez a friend. He was a great servant for this community, and it was a great loss. And so thank you, Miguel, for all you did. Yeah, the Hispanic population, as we know, is a growing population. And it's probably often a misunderstood population as well. A lot of people think that Hispanics do nothing but come and put a drain on the system. They take, but that's not true. The Hispanic community gives, and gives a lot. And they're a very important part of the community. So the first thing we need to do is recognize that if we ignore a piece of the community, in essence, we're ignoring the entire community, because those problems become bigger problems. So we need to, and I'm drawing a blank on the name, but there is a program through Immigration for dealing with victims of crime to protect them from being deported if they come forward. And I think we need to support that, because crime is no good regardless of who it's being committed against. And we can't have a segment of the community being victimized and being afraid to go to the authorities and get the protection that they're entitled to. So that's one of the first steps, is let's look at making sure we protect the rights of the victims regardless of their immigration status.
Very good. Very good. Thank you, Kevin. Hopefully you're right, or we can get behind that, that policy and that law here in the areas to protect these individuals. Mark.
The only thing I'm going to add to that, I think the mayor did a great job. I do think there's a breakdown on some levels. Profiling, I've seen it personally for people that I've helped who've reached out to me and said, you know, I got pulled over, I got blah, 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 what do I do? And so this is more of a compliment. I think Judge Hayward is still on here. I went with a friend to his courtroom and got the young man an attorney. Then the attorney said, there's nothing wrong here. You've done absolutely nothing. And I respected so much Judge Hayward kind of set the record straight in defense of a young man that had done nothing, and really gave, I don't know what I want to call it, a reprimand to the police officer. And I think when you're sitting in a room full of people who are all there for similar reasons, that speaks volumes when you have a leader who will stand up and make a statement to defend, you know, someone who is in this minority group. And I know personally for the people that I was with, it made a huge difference how they saw our government, that they did have people that were willing to protect them. So it's more of a compliment than anything.
Thank you, Mark. Calvin.
Yeah, I definitely I gotta emphasize something that the mayor said. If we ignore a piece of a community, we are ignoring the entire community. I think that is very profound, and he is so on point with that. There are two suggestions that I have. One is build trust and grow the relationship. And it also goes back to something, let me repeat that: build trust and grow the relationship. And so something that the mayor previously said when looking at mirroring representation within all communities early on, I think that's definitely part of the solution. But the other piece is we got to begin to kind of communicate, engage the community in order to kind of grow the level of trust, so that community can grow that level of trust for the community as a whole. And then once you establish a relationship, I think that's where you can begin to kind of truly look at the issues that directly impact your community. And so how part of the ways you can do that is when you begin to send, and you can't just send anyone into the community, because that's where that level of trust or lack of comes in. So when you send the right representatives that are your voice as a community, totality of the community, I think you will truly begin to make inroads into the community, especially once that relationship starts growing and it begins to get established. And so I think it's just really critical to build your objectives and outcomes around trust and relationship.
Very good from all of you. I was just going to add, our Hispanic chamber here in Lee County, Southwest Florida. When I first moved here over 20-something years ago, there'd be a room full of 500, 600 people at a Hispanic chamber event. Now we'd be lucky, and the pandemic aside, we'd be lucky in the last few years to see 50 to 100 people in the room. We need to, I think, also support our Hispanic Chambers of Commerce and Miguel C. Fernandez, Bar Association. Miguel was an outstanding Hispanic leader in our community, and his presence is absolutely missed. And I think Carla and the group that started the Bar Association in his name is doing a great job of keeping his legacy going strong. But I think there's a lot more we can do here locally to build that Hispanic chamber back up, to build back our Hispanic community, putting them more in the forefront and support them. And they're a very supportive, hardworking group. I will tell you that. It's been, great to get to work with them over the years. So maybe there's something more we can all do to support that chamber and other demographics that have their chambers as well, to make sure that we're making them feel included in the community. Speaking of chambers, our next topic for today is LGBTQ plus community. So the following questions were submitted from Arlene Goldberg, founder of multiple organizations serving the LGBTQ plus community. And the questions she submitted, the first one's for Kevin. What does the city of Fort Myers do or plan to do to show and ensure that we are welcoming we are a welcoming city for all LGBTQ plus residents and visitors? What does the city of Fort Myers have planned, or what are you guys currently doing to welcome this diverse community?
I think the biggest thing we do is, like with any group, is we try to everything we do, we try to do in such a way that it is inclusive and there's no discrimination against any group. Now, I know that's very easy to say, but very difficult to do, or challenging, I should say. Not difficult, but it can be challenging at times. But we start off with our hiring practices that you hire people based on qualifications and not you don't fail to include someone based on race, sex, sexual orientation, gender, or any of those things. I'm pleased to say that, we have an openly gay member of the police department in a leadership position. And I think that says a lot about this city. That shows that we are trying to be inclusive.
Very good, very good. And I think, as business owners, as government, as community, as anything, just keeping an open mind about everything. I mean, I think we all hire, hoping that the integrity, the attitude, the individual is just outstanding. But I think we need to be purposeful and intentional in our decisions these days, because we need to make sure we're inclusive of everybody. And you're right, looking at these topic lines, there's so many different
Sure.
diverse groups that are not feeling included. So we definitely all have a little bit of work to do to make sure that we're doing a better job to include them. But I love your points, Kevin.
If I could follow up, you're absolutely right, Connie. I was fortunate enough when I retired from the police department to go to work for a private company that is probably one of the most diverse companies in Lee County. And I spent 15 years there, Chico's. And I'm very proud to say that the Kevin Anderson, who started employment at Chico's in March of 2004, the Kevin Anderson that left there in June of 2019 was very different than the one who went there in March of 2004, because of the diversity of that company and what I was exposed to. I'm very fortunate to have worked there and met some wonderful people, worked with some great people of all walks of life who helped me understand the importance of diversity and inclusion.
Very good. It's, when sometimes we all think we aren't racist, we aren't, biased in any way, but then all of a sudden we're exposed to things that we were never exposed to before. And you realize we're a beautiful city, community, country, state because of the diversity. Embracing our differences, is just a beautiful thing, to embrace the differences we all have. Because
Sure,
if we
and-
all look the same, act the same, behave the same, what a boring community and city and state and world we would live in, right? So it's incredible.
If I could add, most of us grew up being taught that America was like a melting pot. We all blended together. And I think that's not the best example. I like to think maybe we should look at ourselves like a salad, where all the pieces, all the different parts of the salad come together and make something great. We don't lose our identity, our backgrounds, our culture. As with a melting pot, that implies that you just come together, you all change into one thing. Well, as a salad, no, we're a salad, but the tomato, the lettuce, the carrot, whatever else ingredients, they all come together to create something bigger than all of us.
Without losing their individual identities.
Absolutely.
I get you.
Yeah.
I like that. Mark, how do you think we can improve the treatment and inclusion of individuals in this diverse community?
Basically, to tag on to what the mayor said, I grew up in a small town in Alabama. I had never met a Jewish person until I went to college. I'm from a really small town in Alabama. I never felt any bias or any, and I guess thanks to my parents, I was never raised that we were better or worse than anybody, that we were all God's children, we were all the same, we're all doing the best we can, hopefully. My niece is married to an African-American. I have a beautiful great nephew, cutest thing in the world. So I guess I say all that to say, as the mayor said, I think we have to keep an open mind and we have to be willing to grow. All these situations we've talked about so far today, I think the whole thing is that we have to be willing to grow, because the minute we close our minds and the minute we put that wall up, it's done. When you hit a roadblock, it takes a lot of work. Just because somebody's different than I am, that doesn't make them any less. I don't know. I think inclusion is a huge word. And I think most people would love just to pop back and say, oh, I'm inclusive. But you've got to put yourself in the most uncomfortable of situations to find out if you really, really are. I had never met anyone of the Muslim faith until I was in college. Even further, we had 2 Catholic families in my town. That was it. I knew nothing. But you have to be willing to grow and accept people for where they are. It's not our job to try to change people. On the flip side of that, if you're in a demographic that's different, you have to do your part too. You have to be willing to put yourself in a situation. When Lori and I moved out on the river, we had neighbors that were Muslims, and we had the best relationship. But one of the first times we got together, it was just to talk, because, and the lady was honest. She said, I've never had a friend that was in a wheelchair. Tell me what that's like. So they're all learning opportunities if we'll keep our mind open and embrace people's differences. Maybe you can't relate to it. That's okay. That doesn't make it right or wrong. It just means that's what makes them them.
Okay. And anything specific that you can say to improve, any suggestions on how to improve LGBTQ plus specifically, just since that's the topic that we're on right now? And if not, and Kevin covered it, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure I didn't get us off track there on this particular topic.
And I probably took it down the wrong road. Sorry about that.
Don't worry.
No, I think, the short amount of time that they've had Pride Week here, events like that, it's been a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people. But I think as things go on, it's gotten better. Within the community, there's been turmoil. And so that's got to pull together too. A house divided can't stand. So I think it just takes a lot of effort. And I think we're just at the tip of the iceberg of what it will be. But like with anything, it just takes time and really an open, clean heart to make it better. And I know I didn't answer your question, but that's all I got.
That's absolutely fine. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate you. Calvin, the question is, what impact does LGBTQ plus discrimination have on children, especially children who have been abused?
Thank you, Connie. I have to tell you, sometimes I feel like a batter in a baseball game coming behind two gentlemen that hit home runs and Mark and the mayor. So great answers, gentlemen. I appreciate your listening to you and hearing some of the wonderful information that you're providing. To start, I would say LGBTQ youth enter the foster care system for pretty much many of the same reasons as non-LGBTQ youth in care, such as for abuse, neglect, parental substance abuse, etc. Many LGBTQ youth that have that added layer of trauma that comes with being rejected or mistreated because of their sexual orientation, their gender identity, their gender expression. These same youth also face the prospect of pretty much largely experiences with an unsupportive community, outright aggression from peers, and internalized homophobia, transphobia gleaned from anti-LGBTQ environments. It also would be a mistake to assert that unhappiness and depression are caused by being LGBTQ, rather than by living in a society that is pretty much unfriendly to LGBTQ people. LGBTQ youth have a higher average number of foster care placements and are more likely to be living in a group home. They also are more likely to have been homeless at some point in their life. Additionally, when placed in care, they are less likely to find an affirming foster care placement willing to welcome them in their home. LGBTQ youth have been relatively invisible. That is, many do not feel safe telling their foster parents or case managers or advocates about having same-sex attractions or questioning their gender identity. They can experience greater stress, negative outcomes when they're managing their identity, which is when a youth who is not out to everyone in their life and therefore must constantly evaluate and decide in which environments and scenarios they are safe to selectively share information about their LGBT identity, which causes high levels of fear and anxiety for them. Pretty much, I'd be remiss to say, but on top of that, LGBTQ youth of color also face that added stigma, increased bias, structural racism for both being a sexual minority and ethnic and racial minority. Once in a system like the child welfare system, LGBTQ youth of color tend to remain there in foster care much longer, are placed in far greater risk of discrimination and violence compared to their peers. Good suggestion though is that for every adult who can play a role in changing the landscape for LGBTQ youth, sometimes just simply through small actions that help to reinforce inclusiveness, supportive and loving environments in homes and in communities. But however, it is also imperative that we address the discrimination, the bias, the institutional obstacles that pretty much threaten the potential of LGBTQ youth and LGBTQ community to thrive and achieve their full potential.
Thank you, Calvin. I mean, I didn't know those statistics and everything like that. I mean, that's something that maybe even doing a feature story on one of those foster parents or something like that, that just shows the community what amazing foster parents they are in any type of demographic that might not, draw attention to them otherwise. So thank you for sharing that. We have one more topic to go through, and it's veterans in the workplace. Before I go ahead and ask the questions there, just remember that there is a chat box at the bottom. If anyone that's in this on today's webinar wants to ask any of our panelists a question and as far as inclusion in any of these topics, or maybe one we're not covering, please go ahead and submit your question in the chat box, and we'll try to get to that after we get through this last topic that's on our agenda today. So veterans in the workplace, The questions I'm going to ask the panelists were submitted by Joshua Johansson, Assistant Regional Counsel. So Kevin, we're going to start with you. Can you tell us firsthand what you have noticed about the work ethic of veterans and share what you feel can be done to better integrate veterans in the workplace?
Well, full disclosure, Connie, I am the son of a veteran, the nephew of a veteran,
Okay, I found this on the
the
web.
brother of a veteran, and I'm a veteran myself. So I feel that veterans in general do have a good work ethic, but in reality, we are no different than any other group of society. You have some who have great work ethic and others who don't. I mean, that's just human nature. However, you know, veterans tend to come out with something that a lot of other people don't have, is that a sense of discipline.
Mhm.
Because, you know, being in the military requires a lot of discipline. I was fortunate enough that when I applied for the police department, I actually got points on the test for being a veteran. So it gave me a little bit of advantage. Most veterans I know, though, they don't want to be given anything but the same opportunity as anyone else. I think we owe a debt of gratitude to veterans in our country, you know, especially in the most recent years, because the conflicts we've been involved in are much different than the conflicts of the past. And I think we see a greater degree of disabled veterans with very serious disabilities coming back, not just the physical ones, but the mental disabilities as well. I personally, we can't do enough to help our veterans, and I would hire a veteran in a heartbeat. Like I said, I'm biased though.
Well, and thanks for your service too. But
Well,
I
it was
think
my honor to serve.
I'm sorry.
It was my honor to serve, my privilege.
Thank you. Thank you. I know my husband served as well. And I have to tell you that, you know, when we've worked with many veterans over the years, and when you say that discipline that came with the training and the education that veterans receive, they're some of the hardest workers, some of the most dedicated workforce that we've ever had. So just to piggyback on that, Kevin. The next question is to Mark. This year has been challenging for all of us, needless to say. Can you tell us how you feel these challenges have impacted the veterans in our community?
I think that there's not a better group that we should all support than our veterans. They do so much and they've given basically everything. I think it's been very difficult because there's already such a hard time with funding, with healthcare for veterans. This only magnified it so much. The mental health part of it, you know, a lot of them suffer from PTSD and things such as that. Then during the quarantine, that makes it harder. I know since August, being a single person, the quarantine is harder when you're alone. And a lot of these veterans are alone. And a lot of them who are older and they don't have anyone that watches after them, checks on them. The loneliness has got to be unreal. But when you're already dealing with these underlying stressful things, whether it be financial, mental, I just think it's worse. I don't think we can do enough for our veterans.
I would agree with you, Mark, that the isolation factor, it affects everyone. I mean, no one's
Right.
immune to that, but veterans in particular, if they're dealing with PTSD and things like that, absolutely. Plus the fact that funding for nonprofits that might be helping these veterans right now might be lacking the funding for these nonprofits. So keeping that in mind, I would think that's quite a bit of an impact as well. So
Well, I agree with that, Connie, in that I think that that's another one of those groups, like I was talking with Lark, you know, people, for whatever reason we do it, it just gets put on the back burner. We forget it when it's needed more now than ever. What I found in philanthropy is people are giving, but they're so cautious on what they give and how it's being spent. So on our side of this, as far as organizations, I think it's very important that people know exactly where their money's going And I can't imagine any organization not getting on board to help a veteran.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
The next question is for Calvin. Calvin, can you tell us how veteran issues affect children and what you feel we can do to improve the lives of our children in this community?
Thank you, Connie, and also thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your service to our country.
Yes.
To all of those else who are listening on this call, thank you also to your service to our vets. When I think of vets who have returned home from war, I think of courage, toughness, service, grit, and heart. A great example of this is that of a soldier who has risked their life for country, but then turns those same qualities towards helping abused and neglected children in need of fierce advocates in and out of the courtroom. Yes, sometimes the toughest battlefields are here at home, but we have found that some of our most effective community volunteers in our program have military experience that shows from their invaluable character and skills while working throughout their communities. You know, for example, we have a former medic in the Marines who is mentoring a teen as a young man who transitioned into adulthood. And that same person who has never shirked when asked to take children coping with rage and delinquency issues. We have a steely Army vet who takes some of our toughest cases because she specializes in obtaining valuable but hard to get information, identifying issues, collaborating with professionals, and working with families to keep the needs of the children that she serves. We have an Air Force nurse who uses her expertise in cases involving medical neglect, sexual abuse, and those in which the children are victims of human trafficking. And she is a ferocious advocate for the children that she serves. So why they do what they do, they see as ordinary, but pretty much what we see, the things that they do, we consider that extraordinary. Because of veterans, I have been privileged to know as volunteers in our program, I am confident there are more who are eager to serve in meaningful ways back home. So for those of you who have worn the uniform of our country, we are looking for a few good men and women. And yes, that is a shameless plug to recruit you all as volunteer guardian ad litem. So thank you.
For you.
Well, thank you, Calvin. I know there's at least one of our panelists that needs to leave promptly at 5 o'clock, which we're just about at. I want to take the opportunity to thank each of the panelists for answering a lot of these, some of them difficult questions. Obviously, inclusion, there's so many topics we didn't touch on. Likely the Lee County Bar Association will have this conversation going for years to come. This year isn't the first year they've brought this about. They've been working diligently, the committee, on these type of programs for years now, but this conversation will need to keep going. Hopefully everybody leaves with an action item. What can we individually do to make a difference in our community? What can we do to improve inclusion in any one of these areas, if not all? With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to LCBA President Matt Restorff, so he can go ahead and make his closing remarks.
Connie, could I say one thing before you do that?
Absolutely, Kevin.
There's two phrases that I've heard recently that really stick with me when it comes to diversity and inclusion. And that is, diversity is a fact. Those are numbers, and inclusion is an act. And it's one thing to give someone a seat at the table, but it's another thing to give them a voice. And with that being said, I really want to thank the Lee County Bar for putting this on. I also want to acknowledge Mark Collins. This community is very fortunate to have a man of his caliber who does so much. And Calvin, we've never met. I hope one day we met. The only thing I can say to you is I think you've got the good taste in shirts.
That's right. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Kevin.
Well, Connie, I appreciate you coming on and moderating this conversation today. For those who don't take part or don't have the opportunity to take part in a lot of these conversations, I can unequivocally say that this one was by far one of the best that I've been a part of, and absolutely exceptional, not only in the caliber of people we had joining us today with Mark and Calvin and Mayor Anderson. Thank you all for taking time out of your day. But the topics we discussed, the breadth of the topics, the wide range of the issues we discussed, you don't see that a lot. And I'm going to tout our organization a little bit and pat ourselves on the back a little bit, excuse me. You don't see that a lot comprehensively. So I really hope there was something for everybody in this conversation. I think we covered a lot. There were absolute gems of ideas, policy positions, ways we can move forward. So Connie, thank you for taking the time to be with us. Thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you to the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. I want to leave everybody with this. Generally at the end of these type events is some kind of inspirational or rah-rah speech going forward. For those who know me, that's not really my style. What I will say in leading meetings like this, and I've been a part of a few, is a challenge that, inspiration can fade, emotions can fade. You may leave here with a sense of the holiday spirit and wanting to do good for your community at an emotional sense, and that's good. That's a good thing. But as I think each one of us has discussed in some way, those emotions will fade. But what we can all look at is the ways we can objectively improve our community. Every time you see somebody panhandling on a street corner, every time you see a case of abuse in a home, every time you see a horrible story of discrimination, that affects you personally. You may not feel it directly, you may not feel it secondhand, but we're all a part of this community and it affects you. So we all have an interest in objectively seeing these things, pointing them out and saying, what can we do to get ourselves pointed in the right direction? And there's been a ton of good examples. If you feel the call or if you feel the inspiration today to be a part of the solutions for one of those problems we've discussed, I know Kevin and Calvin and Mark are all open and receptive to your feedback and would love to hear from you and to really focus and channel your energy on one challenge. It's hard to take on all these things at one time, but if you feel the call to be a part of a solution to one of these problems, please reach out to the Bar Association, to Kevin, to Calvin, to Mark, to Connie, to any of the people who are here today joining us, because this is a collective. So I want to thank everybody for being part of the conversation. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Again, this is going to be on YouTube. We're recording. If you'd like to share it, we encourage you to do so and check back with our Lee County Bar Association YouTube channel. Thank you all for being a part of this. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, and on behalf of the Lee County Bar Association, thank you all. God bless and have a great weekend.
Thanks.
Thank you.